I'm Ava, I'm 29, and I'm a graphic designer. My world, a carefully constructed universe of shared calendars, quiet evenings, and unwavering support, came to a grinding halt the night my boyfriend of 4 years told me that my love was suffocating him. He didn't just say it, he declared it, like a man breaking free from a prison I didn't even know I had built. His name is Leo, and for as long as I'd known him, his life was a beautiful, chaotic melody. I just never realized he saw me as the metronome, the steady, boring beat holding his symphony captive. Leo is a freelance musician. When we first met at a small cafe's open mic night, I was captivated. He was 23 then, all raw talent and untamed energy, with a guitar that seemed like a natural extension of his own body. I was 25, already settling into a stable career, designing logos and websites for companies that valued predictability. He was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, unpredictable, and gloriously unburdened by the future. I was drawn to his fire, and he said, was drawn to my calm. He called me his anchor in the wild storm of his life. It was a poetic, romantic sentiment. It took me 4 years to understand that anchors don't just offer stability, they also hold you in place. Our life together quickly fell into a pattern. It wasn't a pattern I designed intentionally, but one that formed out of necessity, shaped by the contours of his career and my personality. He was the artist, and I became the patron, the manager, and the ground crew all rolled into one. I remember one of our first big tests about a year into the relationship. Leo had a showcase gig, a chance to play for a small record label scout. He had been practicing for weeks, his focus absolute. What he hadn't focused on was the rent, which was due that same week. His part-time bartending job had cut his hours, and the few gigs he'd played that month had barely covered the cost of his guitar strings and travel. The day before the rent was due, he came to me, his face a mask of panicked despair. "I'm short, Ava," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "I'm a few hundred short, I don't know what to do." I saw the shame in his posture, the fear that this practical failure would derail his artistic dream, so I did what felt natural. I logged into my bank account, transferred the money to our joint account, and said, "Don't worry about it, just focus on your showcase. Knock 'em dead." He looked at me with such profound relief, his eyes shining. "You're my savior," he whispered, hugging me tightly. "I'll pay you back as soon as I get my big break." The showcase went well, though the record deal never materialized, and the big break became a perpetually receding horizon. I never saw that money again, not directly. It was the first of many such loans. Sometimes it was for rent, other times for a new piece of equipment or to cover a bill he'd forgotten about. Each time I told myself it was an investment in his dream, in our future. I was happy to do it, to provide the stable ground from which he could leap for the stars. But over time, his gratitude morphed into expectation. He stopped asking with shame and started mentioning his shortfalls with a casual air, as if he were merely informing me of a utility bill that needed paying. My support was no longer a gift, it had become a line item in his budget. It wasn't just financial. My role as his anchor extended into every corner of his life. Leo lived in a world of melodies and chord progressions, not deadlines and appointments. He would forget to respond to venue owners, double book himself for gigs, or forget to send invoices for gigs he'd already played. In the beginning, I watched him struggle, his creative mind unable to grapple with the mundane logistics of his own career, so I stepped in. I created a shared digital calendar, color-coding his gigs, his rehearsals, and his deadlines. I'd send him gentle reminders. "Hey, don't forget to email Kevin back about Saturday's set list." Or, "Just a heads up, your invoice for the coffee shop gig is 2 weeks overdue." He was grateful at first. "What would I do without you, Ava?" he'd say, kissing my forehead, but slowly the tone changed. My reminders started to feel like nagging to him, my color-coded calendar felt like a cage. One afternoon, I came home to find him staring at his laptop, a frustrated look on his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, putting my groceries on the counter. "It's this stupid contract for the summer festival," he sighed. "It's all legal jargon, I don't get any of it." I spent the next 2 hours sitting beside him, translating the complex clauses into simple terms, helping him draft a professional response. When we were done, he didn't thank me. He just stood up, stretched, and said, "Man, I need to get out of here. All this paperwork stuff drains my soul." He grabbed his guitar and left, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the invisible labor of his life. Although most painful part was the social imbalance. My life was predictable. I worked 9 to 5, had a small circle of close friends, and cherished quiet nights at home. His life was a whirlwind of last-minute jam sessions, smoky bars, and a constantly rotating cast of artist friends. I tried to embrace his world, spending countless nights in loud venues, smiling and nodding as he and his friends discussed obscure bands I'd never heard of. But I often felt like a tourist, an outsider in my own relationship. I would plan a quiet, romantic dinner for us, spending hours cooking his favorite meal, only for him to call at the last minute. Hey babe, so sorry, just got a call from Mark. He's got a last-minute opening at the Blue Note. I have to take it. It's a huge opportunity. It was always a huge opportunity. My carefully prepared lasagna would go into the fridge and I'd eat alone. When I would express my disappointment, he'd look at me with genuine confusion. But this is for us, Ava, he'd say. This is for my career. I thought you supported that. He had managed to frame my desire for his presence as a lack of support for his ambition. He made me feel that my need for stability was a direct threat to his freedom, and for a long time I believed him. I started shrinking myself, making my needs smaller and quieter to give his dreams more room to grow. The final thread holding us together began to fray on a Tuesday. It was my 29th birthday, a day I had been looking forward to with a quiet, simple hope. I didn't want a big party or an expensive gift. All I wanted was a peaceful evening with Leo. I had told him as much for weeks. No gigs, Leo, please, I had said, half joking, half pleading. Just you, me, and a bottle of that wine we like. He'd smiled, promised he would clear his schedule, and I, ever the optimist, believed him. The day started well enough. He made me pancakes in the morning, singing a slightly off-key but endearing version of Happy Birthday. He had a short rehearsal in the afternoon, but he swore he would be back by 6 in time for us to walk to the little Italian restaurant I loved. I spent the afternoon in a state of happy anticipation, a feeling that had become increasingly rare. I laid out my favorite dress, a simple blue linen one he always said he liked. I wrapped a small gift I had gotten for myself, a new set of high-end design pens, and placed it on the table, a testament to my own professional milestones. 6 o'clock came and went. Then 6:30, a familiar knot of anxiety began to tighten in my stomach. I texted him, hey, everything okay? Getting hungry? No reply. At 7:00, I called him. It went straight to voicemail. The knot in my stomach turned to a cold, heavy stone. I knew, of course I knew, he wasn't just running late. He finally walked through the door just after 9:00 p.m., his face flushed with excitement, reeking faintly of stale beer and adrenaline. He was carrying his guitar case. My heart sank. You won't believe what happened, he began, not even looking at my dress or the single candle I had lit on the counter. I was at rehearsal, and Mike, the promoter from the downtown festival, he was there. He heard our new song and he loved it, Ava. He invited us to play an impromptu set at the Crow's Nest tonight. We killed it. I think he's going to offer us a spot on the main stage. I just stared at him. The blue dress felt like a costume. The uneaten dinner I'd put away an hour ago felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I said nothing. My silence was a vacuum, and it finally sucked the manic energy out of him. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his face fell. Oh, he said softly. Oh, Ava, I am so sorry. I got caught up. I lost track of time. You didn't lose track of time, Leo, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You made a choice. You had a commitment to me for my birthday, and you chose a huge opportunity instead, again. And it wasn't just any opportunity, he argued, his voice rising in defense. This is the festival. This is what we've been working for. What we've been working for? I shot back, the years of quiet resentment finally bubbling to the surface. You mean what you've been working for while I organize your schedule, pay your half of the rent, and spend my birthday alone? Is that the we you're talking about? The accusation hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. He had the decency to look ashamed, but it quickly curdled into defensiveness. That's not fair, he said, his jaw tightening. Everything I do is for us, and I feel like all you ever do is try to pin me down. You have all these schedules and plans and expectations. I can't breathe, Ava. The word struck me like a physical blow. Breathes? I'm the one who gives you the air to breathe. I handle everything so you can just float around and play your music. Do you have any idea what it takes to keep this life of yours afloat? See right there, that's what I'm talking about, he shouted, throwing his hands up in exasperation. He started pacing the small living room, his agitation filling every corner of the space. It's always what you do for me. It's like I'm some charity case, not your partner. I feel like I'm constantly failing to live up to some standard you've set. I need space. I need to do things my own way. Then came the words that shattered everything. He stopped pacing and looked right at me, his eyes cold. Stop being so clingy, I need my freedom. Clingy, the word was absurd. I was the one left behind, the one waiting by the phone, the one eating birthday dinners alone. I clung to nothing. I was the rock he tethered himself to, and now he was calling the rope a leash. The injustice of it stole my breath. Fines, I whispered, the fight draining out of me, leaving only a hollow ache. You want freedom, Leo, fines. He took my broken whisper as a victory. I do, he said, his voice firming with resolve. I need to get away from all this, from the city, from the pressure. He gestured vaguely around the apartment at our shared life. The band and I were going to take a trip, just drive, no plans, no schedules, just play music and see where the road takes us. I need to clear my head. I need to find myself again. He started throwing things into a duffel bag with a frantic energy. A few t-shirts, his leather jacket, a notebook. He moved like a man escaping a fire I had apparently started with my love and my stability. He didn't ask me to come. He didn't ask me what I thought. He simply announced his departure. He paused at the door, bag in one hand, guitar case in the other. He looked back at me, my face a mess of tears and disbelief. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a shadow of the man I loved. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a hard resolve. I'll call you when I call you, he said. It wasn't a promise, it was a dismissal. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me in a silence that was louder and more final than all his shouting had been. I stood there for a long time, the cold stone of grief solidifying in my chest. He had gone to find his freedom, and in doing so, he had taken all of my peace with him. The first 24 hours were a blur of shock and a strange, hollow disbelief. The apartment, once a cozy haven, felt vast and menacingly quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the refrigerator was a reminder of the roaring silence Leo had left behind. I walked through the rooms like a ghost, tracing the outlines of our life together. There was his favorite mug, left unwashed by the sink. There was the dent in the sofa cushion where he always sat, his guitar propped up beside him. It was all still there, but the energy, the life force of it was gone. My phone was a lead weight in my hand. I stared at the blank screen, my thumb hovering over his contact photo, a smiling picture of us from a happier time. Part of me, the part conditioned by 4 years of being his support system, expected a text. Made it to the highway, thinking of you, or maybe I'm sorry. This was a mistake, but my screen remained dark. The silence wasn't just an absence of noise, it was a deliberate act. He was actively not contacting me, and that knowledge was a fresh wound with every passing hour. I'd pick up the phone, check for a notification, feel the sting of disappointment, and put it back down, only to repeat the pathetic ritual 10 minutes later. On the second day, the fog of shock began to lift, replaced by a sharp, painful clarity. As I moved through the apartment, I started to see it not as our home, but as my workspace. Not my graphic design work, but the unpaid, unacknowledged job of being Leo's life manager. A pile of his laundry sat in the corner of the bedroom, a silent testament to the chore I usually did without a second thought. On the kitchen counter was a stack of mail I hadn't sorted yet. I saw a final notice for his credit card bill peeking out. His amp was still set up in the living room, a tangle of cords creating a tripwire that I had navigated around for months. For 4 years, I had moved through our shared space like water, flowing around his chaos, smoothing the rough edges, cleaning up the messes he left in his wake. I did it because I loved him, and I thought that's what love was, a quiet, steady act of service. Now, standing in the silence, seeing the physical evidence of my invisible labor, I felt a flicker of something new beneath the grief. It was a tiny, unfamiliar spark of anger. He wanted freedom. What he really wanted, I realized, was freedom from consequence. He wanted a life where laundry washed itself, bills paid themselves, and schedules managed themselves, leaving him free to pursue his art. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a live-in assistant who also paid half the rent. That evening, the spark of anger was nearly extinguished by a fresh W. Ave of despair. I was curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at a muted television screen when my phone finally buzzed. My heart leaped with a sickening lurch of hope, but it wasn't Leo. It was my best friend, Clara. Hey, she said, her voice warm and cautious. Haven't heard from you in a couple of days. Everything okay? The simple question broke the dam. A sob tore its way out of my chest, raw and ragged. He's gone, Clara, I cried, the words tumbling out between gasps. He left, he said. He said I was clingy. I told her everything, the birthday, the fight, his speech about freedom, the silent phone. Clara listened patiently, making quiet, sympathetic noises. Clara had always been wary of Leo. She was a no-nonsense lawyer who saw the world in terms of evidence and precedent, and from her perspective, the evidence had long suggested that Leo was a bad investment. She never said it outright, but I saw it in the way she looked at me whenever I recounted another one of his last-minute cancellations or financial emergencies. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. I expected an "I told you so" or a rant about what a selfish jerk he was. Instead, she said something that changed everything. "Ava," she said gently, "do you remember who you were 4 years ago before you met him?" The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, do you remember the woman who went on a solo backpacking trip through Southeast Asia? The one who started her own freelance business from scratch? The one who used to spend entire weekends covered in paint, working on huge, messy, brilliant canvases just for the fun of it? I was silent. I hadn't thought about that version of myself in years. The backpack was gathering dust in the back of my closet. The easel was folded up behind a bookshelf. That adventurous, fearless woman felt like a stranger from a different lifetime. That woman didn't need a man to be her anchor because she was her own damn ship, Ava, Clara continued, her voice firm but kind. Leo didn't anchor you, he dropped anchor on you. He saw your strength and your stability and he latched onto it, and you've been carrying his weight ever since. Her words sliced through my grief and hit the core of that new, flickering anger. She was right. I hadn't been clingy, I had been chained. My stability wasn't a cage for him, his instability had been a cage for me. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, letting her words sink in. A slow, steady resolve began to form within me. He wanted freedom, he wanted space. Fine, I would give it to him, but I would take some for myself too. My first act was a declaration of independence. I picked up my phone, went to his contact, and switched the ringer to silent. I wouldn't spend another minute waiting for a call that might never come. My second act was to reclaim my space. I started with his pile of laundry. I gathered it all up, put it in a black trash bag, and tied it shut. I wasn't going to wash it. It could wait for him to return. Then I went to the living room and began disassembling his amp, neatly coiling the cords and packing the whole thing away in the hall closet. The room instantly felt bigger, brighter. Finally, I walked over to the bookshelf, pulled out the dusty, folded easel, and set it up in the center of the living room, right where his amp used to be. I didn't have any canvases or paints anymore, but it didn't matter. Just seeing it standing there, waiting, felt like a promise. It was an act of defiance. The silence in the apartment was no longer the sound of his absence. It was the sound of my own life waiting to be heard. The days that followed were a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Every now and then, a wave of sadness would wash over me, usually triggered by something small, the smell of coffee brewing in the morning, a song on the radio he used to love. I would allow myself to feel it, to acknowledge the pain of the 4 years I had invested. But instead of letting it drown me, I learned to float. And in the calm waters between those waves, I started to swim. My rediscovery of myself began with my friends. I called up the friends I had let drift away, the ones whose invitations I had so often declined because Leo had a last-minute gig or simply wasn't in the mood for a planned social event. I was afraid they would be resentful, but they welcomed me back with open arms and knowing smiles. "We missed you," said Maya as we sat in a sunny park one afternoon. "We just figured you were busy." I explained what had happened, and they listened with the kind of sympathy that only old friends can provide. They didn't bash Leo, they just focused on me. We talked for hours, not about my relationship, but about books, about our jobs, about silly memories from college. It was like finding a part of my own personality that had been locked away. With them, I wasn't Leo's girlfriend, the responsible one who always had one eye on her phone. I was just Ava. I laughed, a real deep belly laugh for the first time in what felt like an eternity. That weekend, on a whim, I went to an art supply store. I walked through the aisles, the smell of turpentine and fresh paper filling my lungs. I bought a set of acrylic paints, a few canvases, and a new set of brushes. Back in my quiet, spacious apartment, I put on some music, not the indie rock Leo favored, but the classical music I had always loved, and I began to paint. It was clumsy at first. My hands felt stiff, my sense of color rusty, but I wasn't trying to create a masterpiece. I was just trying to feel something other than heartache. I painted for hours, losing all track of time, a smear of ultramarine blue on my cheek and a sense of profound peace in my heart. The finished canvas was a chaotic mess of color and emotion, but it was mine. I had created something out of my own silence, my own space. I hung it on the wall where a framed poster of one of Leo's favorite bands used to be. It looked much better. A new routine began to emerge, one that wasn't dictated by the whims of a freelance musician. I started waking up early not to check if Leo had come home, but to go for a run in the cool morning air. I started cooking again, but not the hearty, practical meals he preferred. I made elaborate, delicate dishes for myself, things that took time and artistry just because I could. I ate at the dining table, not on the couch in front of the TV. I was dating myself in a way, and I was proving to be a pretty considerate partner. This newfound energy spilled over into my professional life. For months, a potential client, a high-end boutique hotel, had been on my radar. They needed a complete branding overhaul, a huge and creatively demanding project. I had been hesitant to pursue it aggressively, knowing the long hours would conflict with Leo's unpredictable schedule and his need for my attention. Now my evenings were my own. I dove into the project, staying up late, not out of obligation, but out of pure, unadulterated passion for my work. I crafted a proposal that was ambitious and elegant, filled with sketches and concepts that came to me in a flood of inspiration. I sent it off not with anxious hope, but with a quiet confidence. In the solitude, my perspective on the last 4 years began to sharpen. It was like looking at a blurry photograph that was slowly coming into focus. I saw the countless small compromises I had made, the way I had tailored my ambitions to fit around his. I remembered turning down a job offer in another city 2 years ago, a fantastic opportunity, because Leo had said he couldn't uproot his musical connections. I realized he hadn't asked me to stay. I had simply assumed my career was the more portable, the more flexible, the more expendable of the two. I thought about his quest for freedom. What did that word even mean to him? It seemed to mean freedom from responsibility, freedom from the boring, everyday tasks that make life function. He wanted to live the romantic life of a freewheeling artist, but he had conveniently forgotten that for most of history, those artists had patrons. They had someone in the background handling the practicalities, funding their genius. He hadn't rejected a clingy girlfriend. He had fired his unpaid patron. The anger I felt was no longer hot and volatile, it was a cool, hard certainty. I had given him everything and he had called it nothing. The most profound realization was this: my love for him had become a cage for me, and by leaving, he hadn't found his freedom, he had handed me my own. It had been 10 days since Leo left, 10 days of silence from him, but 10 days of rediscovering the sound of my own life. I was in my home office, putting the finishing touches on a new logo design for a local bakery when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it was from our area code. For a fleeting second, my old instincts kicked in a jolt of adrenaline, a thought that maybe he'd lost his phone and was borrowing someone else's. I let it go to voicemail, my heart beating a little faster than I wanted to admit. A minute later, a text came through from the same number. Ava, it's Mark, Leo's drummer. Can you please call me? It's kind of important. Mark was the most grounded member of the band. He was a few years older, married, with a steady day job as a carpenter. He treated music as a passion, not a lottery ticket. My curiosity piqued. I stepped out onto my small balcony and dialed the number. Ava, thanks for calling back, he said, his voice sounding strained. Hi, Mark, is everything okay? Is Leo okay? I asked, a genuine flicker of concern pushing through my newfound detachment. There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. Physically, yeah, he's fine. Mentally, he's a mess. The whole trip is a mess, Ava. To be honest, it's been a disaster from day one. I stayed silent, letting him talk. He had this grand vision, like we were going to be in some movie, just driving down the coast, writing masterpieces, and getting discovered in some dive bar. Mark continued, a bitter edge to his voice. The reality is we've been sleeping in the van, eating cheap fast food, and arguing constantly. He paused, and I could hear the sound of traffic in his background. Last night was the final straw. We had a gig lined up in this little coastal town, a decent one, paid pretty well. Leo was supposed to confirm the time and equipment details with the owner a week ago. He swore he did. He forgot, didn't he? I said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. It was a statement, not a question. Completely, Mark confirmed. We showed up and the owner had given the slot to another band. He said he never heard back from Leo. Leo tried to argue, made a total scene. It was embarrassing. After that, the other guys and we just had enough. We're turning around, we're heading home. I processed the information. The irresponsible artist, the chaos agent, had finally created a mess so big that even his easygoing bandmates couldn't tolerate it. A part of me, a dark, hidden part, felt a grim sense of satisfaction. But mostly, I just felt tired. Why are you telling me this, Mark? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Because he's broke, Ava. He spent his share of the gas money on God knows what in the first few days. He's been borrowing from me and the others, but we're tapped out. He's been trying to get a hold of his dad, but he's not answering. Leo, he's talking about you. He keeps saying he needs to call you, that you'll know what to do. There it was, the real reason for the call. I wasn't his ex-girlfriend, I was his emergency contact, his financial safety net. They weren't calling for my emotional support, they were calling for a wire transfer. The last 4 years of my life crystallized into that one humiliating moment. A year ago, I would have been frantic. I would have asked for his location, found the nearest bank, and sent whatever money he needed without a second thought. I would have been sick with worry, my own needs completely forgotten. But the Ava standing on the balcony now was a different person. I see, I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen lake. So, Mark prompted, clearly waiting for me to offer a solution. So I hope he figures it out, I replied. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with shock. Mark was clearly not expecting this response. That's it, he finally stammered. You're not going to help. Help how, Mark? I asked, and for the first time I felt a surge of genuine power. He wanted freedom. He wanted to stand on his own 2 feet without me being so clingy. It sounds like he's getting exactly what he wanted. This is his journey of self-discovery. It wouldn't be right for me to interfere. There was nothing he could say to that. I had used Leo's own logic against him. I had handed him the freedom he so loudly demanded, and now that it had a price tag, he wanted to return it. Okay, Ava, he said finally, his voice full of a new, grudging respect. I get it, I'll tell him you said that. You do that, Mark, have a safe drive back, I said, and then I did something I had never done before. I ended the call. I didn't wait for him to reply, didn't try to soften the blow. I just pressed the red button on my screen. I stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the sun dip below the skyline, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel vindicated or even happy. I felt a profound, unshakable sense of peace. The last thread connecting me to his chaos had been cut not by him but by me. He was no longer my problem to solve. For the first time in 4 years, I felt truly, completely free. And in the quiet of my apartment, I heard the chime of an incoming email. I walked inside and looked at my computer. The subject line read, Project Proposal Accepted. The boutique hotel job was mine. Another 3 days passed. 3 days of intense, exhilarating work on the hotel project, of long dinners with friends, of quiet evenings spent painting on my balcony. I was so immersed in my new life that I almost forgot about the impending drama, but I knew it was coming. The van carrying the remnants of Leo's failed adventure was making its slow way back to the city, and with it, a confrontation I could no longer avoid. The call came on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the middle of my living room, which now doubled as my art studio, sketching out ideas on a large sheet of paper spread across the floor. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to ring. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew it was him. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep, steadying breath before I answered. Hello. Ava. His voice was a ghost from Ano. Their life, it was thin, tired, and stripped of all its usual bravado. It was the voice of a man who had been defeated, not by some grand artistic struggle, but by the mundane realities of life. Hi, Leo, I said, my tone even and polite. I was surprised at how calm I felt. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I'm back in town, he said, as if I wouldn't have known. I'm at a gas station just off the highway. Okay, I replied. How was your trip? I asked the question with genuine, detached curiosity, the way you might ask a distant acquaintance about their vacation. My calmness seemed to throw him off completely. He was clearly expecting a tirade of anger or a flood of relieved tears. My simple, polite question left him unmoored. It wasn't what I expected, he stammered. It was tough, a lot harder than I thought. Oh, I see, I said. There was a long, awkward pause. I could hear the beeping of a truck backing up in the background on his end. He was waiting for me to fill the silence, to ask him if he was okay, to tell him to come home. I refused. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to be the one to navigate it. So are you, can I come over? He finally asked, his voice small. I'm a little busy right now, Leo, I said, looking around at the creative, happy mess of my life spread all over the floor. It was the truth. Busy? He sounded incredulous. Ava, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. I just drove for 6 hours straight. I'm exhausted. I just want to come home. This is my home, Leo, I corrected him gently. You left, remember. His frustration began to bubble through his exhaustion. What is this, Ava? Are you trying to punish me? Look, I get it. I messed up. I'm sorry about your birthday. I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. I was overwhelmed, but I'm back now. Can we please just put this behind us? He thought this was about my birthday. He thought a simple apology would reset everything, that he could just slot himself back into the life he had abandoned, the life I had continued to maintain for him in his absence. He had no idea that the foundation he was trying to return to no longer existed. There's nothing to put behind us, Leo, I said. You wanted to find out who you were without me holding you back. It sounds like you did. That's when he finally broke. The thin veneer of control in his voice cracked and a raw, desperate plea came through. I can't do this without you, Ava, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The trip was a nightmare, nothing worked, I couldn't write, I couldn't think, I missed you, I miss our apartment, I miss everything. What do you miss, Leo? I asked, my voice still quiet, but now with a sharp, clinical precision. What specifically did you find was missing? He was confused by the question. What do you mean, I miss you, I miss us? Do you? I pressed. Do you miss me, Ava, the person? Or do you miss having someone to book your gigs, someone to make sure your bills are paid on time? Do you miss having a clean apartment to come home to, a hot meal waiting for you, and a bottomless bank account to dip into whenever your art doesn't pay the rent? The silence on his end was my answer. It was a gaping, damning void. He had called back expecting to find his girlfriend, but what he truly found missing was his entire support system. His manager, his maid, his banker, his mother. All of them had been bundled into the convenient package he called Ava, and he had walked out on them all. Now, standing alone at a gas station, tired and broke, he was realizing that the freedom he had so desperately craved was just another word for being completely, utterly alone with the consequences of his own choices. I need you, Ava, he finally whispered, the words a desperate admission of defeat. A sad, tired smile touched my lips. I know you do, I said, but the real question is, do I still need you? The silence that followed my question was the most honest moment we had shared in years. It was a silence heavy with the weight of everything I had done for him and everything he had taken for granted. He had no answer for me. In that moment, he finally understood that this wasn't a negotiation. The power dynamic of our entire relationship had fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. You went away to find your freedom, Leo, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the bustling street below. And the funny thing is, while you were gone, I think I found mine. I explained it to him then, not with anger, but with a simple, factual clarity. I told him about the friends I had reconnected with, the painting I had started, the quiet joy I had found in my own company. I told him about the boutique hotel project, about the passion I had rediscovered for my own work, a passion I had allowed to be overshadowed by his for far too long. I wasn't listing why accomplishments to spite him. I was outlining the new terms of my own life. The person you left 2 weeks ago doesn't live here anymore, I concluded. I don't know who I am yet, not completely, but I know I'm not the woman who waits by the phone. I'm not the woman who cleans up someone else's messes. And I'm not a safety net for a man who mistakes support for a cage. So what does that mean? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Is it over? I thought about it for a moment. Was it over? The old relationship, the one-sided dynamic of giver and taker, was absolutely dead. There was no going back to that, but the future, that was an unwritten page. It means I need time, Leo, I said. A lot of times, you need to go back to your parents' place or find a room to rent. You need to stand on your own 2 feet for real this time. You need to learn how to manage your own life, pay your own bills, and book your own gigs. You need to figure out who you are when nobody is there to catch you. And you, he asked. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not catching someone else, I replied. I'm not making any promises. The way we were, that's over. If we ever have a future, it will have to be as two whole people, not one person holding up the other. And honestly, I don't know if that's possible, and I don't know if I even want it. I could hear the finality in my own voice. I was releasing him, not out of anger, but out of a newfound love for myself. I was choosing my own peace over his comfort. He didn't argue, he didn't plead. He just said, "Okay, Ava," in a voice that was utterly broken, and we hung up. I stood there for a long time, my phone in my hand, but I wasn't looking at it. I was looking at the canvas I had hung on my wall, the chaotic, colorful, beautiful mess that was all mine. The apartment was quiet, but it was a vibrant, peaceful silence now, filled with the potential of my own life. My future was a blank canvas, and for the first time in a very long time, I was the only artist holding the brush. I felt a sense of calm and control that was more satisfying than any romance had ever been. My world hadn't ended when he walked out the door, a new one had just begun. To anyone listening who has ever felt like they were shrinking themselves to fit into someone else's life, my advice is this: don't. Your love, your support, and your stability are gifts, not chains. You are not a foundation for someone else's dream, you are your own masterpiece in the making. The right person won't ask you to make yourself smaller to give them more room. The right person will bring their own canvas and paint right alongside you.